Hello everyone and welcome to our latest webinar. Today I'm talking with Naeem Abraham from CNR Software, and we'll be discussing how AI is giving us or can give us an advantage in transforming customer experience. Naeem, welcome to the show today. Would you like to give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thank you for it. And thank you to everyone that has joined. It's always that time is valuable, so I always appreciate it when people join these things. I am unique in my experience. So if I could talk more about that, and it's the part of the webinar that I hate the most, talking about myself. But I have specialized within the context of customer service and collections and recoveries pretty much my entire career. And I've looked at it from different angles. So I have headed up IT teams in terms of managing and developing collections and customer service systems. I have managed business and process analysis teams. I've headed up innovation and strategy teams looking purely at customer service, collections, and recoveries, as well as leading transformation programs. So, and the only reason I say that is, because it's given me a unique perspective, because I've had to be, and I've been forced to look at all of these items within different lenses. So I've had the unique position to be able to look at that and see the different practical implications of what we actually want to do and how we want to enable change.
Great, thank you very much. And let me sort of just tell our audience a little about myself and Aram. So those who have seen us before will know that I'm the head of advisory services here at Aram, and we support clients across the world to improve the way they collect their income. One of the things that we do, and the reason we're having this webinar today, is that Aram have a global program which is called Aram Approved, where we review software services like the one that CNR Software have against our criteria, and we call it the Aram Approved program. And I'm pleased to say that Debt Manager is an Aram Approved system. Right. With that, let's get right into the details of the show today, because we are recording, so we're not live as we would normally be. Naeem, tell us a bit about the dream when it comes to what we should be aiming for when it comes to using AI and transforming customer service.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking and discussing of where's a good place to start, I really like to put it into three really bits of context. The first is really the opportunity, the dream that exists out there. I think secondly, we'll go into a little bit more of the reality. And then what I want to spend the most amount of time on is really how do we face that reality. So that's pretty much what's to come. In terms of the dream and the opportunity, historically, right, credit risk, customer service, many operations see the same thing. And it's really been about having a balance between customer, cost, and risk. And this triangular dance floor, we have danced, many of us have actually done this dance where we have to be at one point in the dance floor. We can't fill the entire dance floor. So we've had to ensure that we've had trade-offs. So, we can try and focus on one particular goal, but generally what happens is, we just move on to another and sacrifice the other. So there's this constant trade-off. And what generally happened through this when times really got tough is customer experience took the biggest hit. And that was for many, many reasons, right? But the reality is, right, and has been for quite a while, is that the customer experience cannot take that hit because it has become more about just the profitability of my organization having a happy customer, but it's really become about my survival. However, right, this balance and this dance doesn't have to be, the norm. And sacrificing the client doesn't have to be an option, right? Because if you leverage data and AI, what we can actually do is target all of these three pillars at once. So if you think about the automation aspects, I can lower my cost. If you think about how I use my intelligence, my segmentation, I can ensure that I'm within the right risk. And with the personalization options, and the different things that I can actually do, I can still maintain a happy customer at the same time, which means the opportunity now is not about the trade-off, but how can I actually maximize all three using the intelligence I have and using AI, right? So less compromise, much greater impact. And this enables client growth, especially in markets where the cost of acquisition is very, very high, right? You are able to understand and maximize your client lifetime value, right? And to me, the most important thing about that is I can bring empathy through to my processes. I can understand when to focus as onto the customer, because I have a much longer term view of how this relationship is going and what it means, as opposed to measuring it only at a point in time. So that really, for it, is the dream that I think we've always had. I think this has been the dream ever since we've started. That's always been what we want to accomplish. Now it's a lot more achievable.
What is it, do you think, about AI that actually makes this dream more achievable now?
So I think it's just about the actual technology. I think, if you take for an example, financial well-being, ideally what we would love to have had is a private financial advisor for every single person, right? But the cost, just kind of didn't make that possible, right? So, but if we each had a personal financial advisor that could help us through a myriad of things, we'd have much better outcomes, right? But the cost was prohibitive. So now we have that technology. We can actually scale like a personal financial advisor at a much lower cost for every single one of our customers. And it just makes it way more achievable. So it's always been achievable in theory. It's just never been practical. AI makes it a lot more practical.
Okay.
Right. So that being said, right, so we have this dream, we have this opportunity, right? And that's where we find ourselves, as leaders of a business, is this is what we can achieve, right? And then we have the data saying that, all of the global organizations are using AI to enhance customer satisfaction. 85% of business cite round-the-clock chatbot availability as a top benefit. And we are bombarded with all of this information around how AI is being used, what are these huge successes, right? And it can feel overwhelming because it'll be like, okay, am I catching up? Am I up to date with everything that is going on? Am I lagging behind? Where am I? So there's this whole bunch of material that is coming of what you should be doing and how everyone is using it really, really well. And I've got this dream here. But the question I keep on asking myself, and I have many, many discussions with people across the industry, why is the reality feeling so different? Why does it not feel like we've shifted that needle in terms of business value? And that is what I really want to look at is, in our experience, it is this implementation gap between understanding what we need to do, understanding the technology, but then actually implementing it in a way that truly adds value and feels like you're moving forward. And that's really what I want to address, because this implementation gap is leading us to a state where I think we feel like there's so much of potential, but we just don't feel it being realized in a really significant way.
Do you think that's an issue across the whole market, or do you think certain geographies or types of businesses, where do you feel that sort of difference in reality is the most acute?
I think there are certain segments and industries where AI is a very, very good fit from the beginning, right? Traditionally, maybe a very low risk business, something, like, questionnaires or anything like that, that would be, very, very simple to do, and you would make some serious progress. However, when it comes to practical operational processes, right, it's a little bit more than that, because you can't just implement a little portion of it. You have to really think about it. And that's what I really want to touch on, in terms of these 4 key themes, right? Where we've seen success and where we've seen some really good adoption is where people have really looked at these four themes and really understood them, and how do I look for value first, right? Because that's going to create the momentum that I want, right? That's going to get me a lot more budget and a lot more resources to do even more, right? So I'm building momentum through value first, right? Playing to AI strengths, right? Ensuring that what I'm actually doing needs AI, and that is the answer, right? And we'll get to that. The one thing I really want to focus on, because out of all of the four, right, AI done right is probably what I've seen the least amount of work done on, right? And suggestions on how to do that right. So I really want to spend some time there. And then really about where people have looked at a process, looked at a customer journey and said, okay, how do I reimagine it, given the possibilities that AI can give me, as opposed to saying, okay, here's my existing process. I'm going to replace this block with some sort of AI technology that doesn't always fit well.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's go to putting value first, right? So let's understand this. What we mean by that is understand that AI adoption, right, while it might be valuable in terms of learning, is not the objective. The objective is what value am I adding to my customer? What value am I adding to my business? What value am I adding to my users? Right. So it's really about understanding, right, what is the value that I'm going to add? And what you'll end up doing if you focus just on technology, you'll build an incredible amount of features when really a box would actually suit the need, right? And what happens is when you start complicating features, you actually start creating more and more complexity of things to test, things to consider, whereas the need is actually very, very simple. So if you focus on the value and what's going to add the most amount of value, that's going to lead you to having the right product features in terms of what's going to actually add value, as opposed to product features because they seem really, really cool, and I can do them. So really, it's easier said than done. I know it sounds simple, but with all of the hype and with all of the fast-moving nature of a lot of disruption, it's sometimes we need to check ourselves and ensure that we're putting value first, right? And I think once you've established that, because I think we all know, that one's really well, it's really about playing to AI strengths, right? So on the left-hand side, and I laugh about this a lot, is that's an AI-generated image, which is actually really, really horrible, right? And the image on the right actually is the one I created with Smart Art, that is probably took me two 2 minutes. Now, the AI generated one had the exact same prompt as I did, except it created something very, very quickly that was just not usable. So again, that is not the fault of the AI. That is my fault because I'm trying to use it for something where I can use it where I don't need to, where I can do it much simpler, I should say. So when you look at automation tasks, data analysis and insight, personalization, predictive analytics, natural language processing, decision support, everything that's listed there, I mean, that's really, really good candidate for AI technology, right? And you're going to get so much of value by playing to its AI strengths, right? We've seen that with predictive analytics over the years, how much value that adds, right? We can see some early signs on personalization and how you can generate content and how you can really, really get a response from your customer, right? But when you try and start using it for things like ethical decision making, expecting it to have some emotional intelligence and explainability, that's when we start being like, okay, well, hold on. Are our expectations too much, or is there more work that we need to do? Now, this field is changing each time. So I might look at that and that might be a weakness right now, right? It might turn out to be a strength because somebody's cracked that particular portion of it, right? So it's very, very fast changing. And I would say the way to ensure that you're playing to AI strengths is evaluation, right? So we've heard about model evaluations, what's the right model for what I want to achieve. You need to consistently look at your use case and evaluate what's the correct solution, because that's changing all the time. But again, it ensures that you're playing to AI strengths, and not trying to create something that is going to get you 70% of the way there, but you're going to spend months and months trying to close off 30% that you really don't need to close, because that's generally not where the value is.
And that relationship between sort of value and the strengths, is that a waterfall process where you have to be really, really clear about the value before you start using AI, or is it more of an iterative process where perhaps by using it you can learn and amend? What sort of best advice would you give to people who are wanting to actually use AI but perhaps aren't entirely sure of its capabilities?
I think it's really around, there is no best practice for this yet. That's what I've come to the actual conclusion. It's not a science yet, it's an art. So what it really comes down to is assessing your particular situation. What resources do you have? What's sort of in your budget? What's the value you're trying to solve? What is the journey you're on culturally in terms of, becoming AI native? When you put that all together, you actually can see realistically what am I actually trying to achieve, right? And that might be a much more smaller steps. It might be a bit of R&D combined with some steps, and that might be okay. I understand what the end goal is, right? And I want to go through and do that, or I need to think about this more and take a bit more waterfall approach. I'm not saying I favor any of them, but in something where the industry is changing so quickly, I would say going waterfall is probably not the right approach, because by the time you finish your analysis, probably the likelihood is the technology has also changed as well. So I would say get a good feel for it, get a feel for what you're capable of, and then just roll with it and just start.
Okay. And how important is it to be able to measure that value, to be able to tell whether or not actually you're delivering against your aims and objectives in the first place?
That is probably such a good point, right? Because if you don't do that, you can really, really drift away from what you actually originally intend to do. So being intentional is very important, but we see a lot of people, I mean, we've experienced it all in our careers. We very, very intentional at the beginning of a project, and then it tends to just drift away in terms of what we actually want to do. So always bringing yourself back to your business case, what you're actually trying to solve, I think is paramount to ensuring a good AI adoption.
Yeah, I mean, I know certainly I've been sort of guilty of this. You can be very seduced by technology, seduced by something new, right? And you sort of forget, actually, is there a rate of return? That famous phrase we love to use, somewhere in there. If it was my own money that I was using, would I be spending it or on this stuff? And how would I get my return back? So being able to understand, back to your point, what's the value? How do we measure that? How do we keep on top of that? I think is certainly one of the lessons that I've learned through doing this many times with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really about being fit for purpose. I took a Waymo recently, a self-driving car. It was a great experience, right? But it took me double the time that it would to take an Uber, right? So really, if that is what you want to do, and you want to go into to R&D and experience what it's capable of, and you feel that that's going to give you value in the future in terms of how you're going to think about problems, then absolutely, that's where the value is. But don't confuse it with, okay, there's going to be business value. If it's R&D and you want to experience and you want to play around, then that's your objective. But you can't necessarily do both, because it can lead you off track.
Yeah, I hear when I talk to commentators a lot at the minute, they talk about the value being between the interaction between the human and the AI. So thankfully, AIs aren't quite good enough to replace us yet, as your image there correctly shows. There's still in a space for artists and creativity, but that interaction between the AI. So you say if you get the right inputs, then the AI can help if you get the wrong inputs, the AI can work against you, or certainly not be supportive. So in your experience, what is the right balance between collaboration between humans and AI? Is there a perfect balance, or is that something that needs to be found?
I think it really comes down to, and that actually leads me very, very nicely to my third point, right, in terms of how you actually set this up, right? Because it really comes down to what journey are you actually on? Because
Yeah.
what I think about it is there's a journey to automation, and there's a journey not to replace people. There's a journey to replace activities, and that is what AI is doing. And there's a journey of using human capital in different ways to enhance your business. So these two journeys are running at the same time, and not necessarily one journey where I'm just looking about how I can replace these roles. No, there's two things. How can I replace these activities that I'm going to be able to do them much cheaper, faster, right? And a lot less risk. But then how do I use the human capital that I have to essentially create those new ideas, to develop new experiences, to do different things that the AI just can't do at this point in time? So the synergy can work really well if you try and propel both of them, but just trying to do one will give you this option of, well, is one replacing the other?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes down to, and we at CNR Software have this question: is it done right? So if you know us, one of our strategic themes is cloud done right, and it's a question that our CEO Ed Wallen consistently challenges us on. Is it done right? Is it done the correct way? And what I'm going to present now is really what we have found through our experience to actually look at how you can adopt AI correctly, and what are those building blocks that you need to do to ensure success, right? We've seen, a lot of people go for surface level value. So jump directly through a front end solution that's going to go to my customers. And what you start having is bespoke solutions all over the place. Now, that will get you value on day one, and we'll high five, you've reached your business case. But my requirements are consistently changing. When I was a client of CNR, running a business is I don't know what I want next week, but I want to know and have the security that if I need to react to a market condition, or I want to take an opportunity, or I want to respond to something that's gone wrong, I want to be able to do that very, very quickly, right? And it's business agility that I'm seeking. So the tools are great, but if I start using too many tools and too many solutions, what ends up happening is I create this complexity, which means when I want to change things, it becomes really difficult. We've all experienced where we run multiple campaigns on different technologies. One is done in batch, one update is done in real time. There's timing issues. So a client could end up in two campaigns, or answered on one campaign and then calls in and like, I don't know that you've actioned it. So it can get very, very complicated to change. So what essentially where we need to start is with central orchestration and really having a single client journey. Because once I understand the history in one place, right, and once I orchestrate the journey from one place, I can absolutely look at what is the right thing to do, considering everything around this customer or everything around this process. So central orchestration is critical. If you do not have that, it's so difficult to manage your strategy, it's difficult to change it. So it's really around that bed that you really need to focus your entire adoption on. And with that comes AI accelerated delivery. So it's really about, being AI native personally and in our organization and our teams, right? So you have to have AI accelerated delivery. So you got to think about it in every single way. You can't have an AI solution built, but you're doing things very, very traditionally, right? Because you're just not going to be able to adopt quickly enough. So not just a sexy front end, but really looking at how do we become more agile and how do we ensure that our work is done faster. So whether that's coding, whether it's workflow, whether it's config, how do I do that very, very easily? How do I do that with some natural language as opposed to, trying everything down a road where it's very, very complicated and very, very code-based? So once you have central orchestration and you've got a base where you can move really quickly because you're thinking AI native, right? The next is then building that leg around your data and your intelligence. Because really, once you've got a base, this is going to dictate, right, how you actually harness your intelligence, right? And this is why FitLogic was absolutely paramount for us, because that's where it actually comes together. So you've got intelligent insights, you've got your data structured, but how do you use that in a really, really positive way? What is that strategy? What is that segmentation, right? To really ensure that you have the best possible strategy in terms of whether it's a customer, an account, a process. How do I ensure that that is enabled, right? For an example, you don't want to throw self-service opportunities at every single client. What you actually want to do is understand which segments you are most adept to dealing with self-service, right? Which actually needs a human being speaking to them, because you, in collections, for an example, you're going to get a better arrangement than a self-service. So it's really about understanding the data you have, understanding more and more about your customer through the data you have, and then using it really to create this operationalized intelligence is almost the right word for it. Because so again, solid foundation, using my data, and then I can start getting really, really fancy about it, right? So then I can look at my digital outreach. I can look at cognitive customer engagement. Sounds very fancy, right? But it's really about how do I reach, how does my outreach really impact my clients? So how do I, using my hyper personalization and my intelligent insights, right? How do I, understand the best medium to contact a customer, the best time, and then using personalization, right, to be able to construct the message in the way that elicits a response. So I'm not chasing a connect, I'm actually chasing a response. But because I've, got all of these capabilities down the pyramid, I'm able to then, ensure that my outreach is backed by my strategy, but also, flexing the AI capabilities around personalization and content generation. And then the flip side is augmented agents leading to autonomous agents, right? So we have our agentic framework, right? And we have assistants that you can configure through that. So you can build agents, you can string together agents to actually solve a problem. But what you want to first do is ensure that it augments your process, right? Before you can trust it to actually go fully autonomous. So how do you build that journey to get really, really slick about things? So is it a call center prompt coach, that is running along the side, that is consistently feeding your agents, your actual human agents, with what you actually want them to actually probe on? What's the right sentiment to use, right? All of this analysis going into the background to make your human agents really, really super agents. So I'm not navigating a system. I'm not trying to figure out the process and the rules and the regulation. How do I have this prompt agent, right? And we've successfully tested this. It's really, really great, where you can, as a call center, here's my authentication. This is how we've summarized the client, right? And once you've got the summarized client, this is the tone you should be using. These are the actions you should be going for. And once you get that right, you can move on to fully autonomous agents. But again, now that and I'm going through this intentionally, once you've got the rest of the pyramid sorted, that becomes easy to change. And more importantly, I can fail very, very quickly, because I'm not failing directly through the stack. I don't have to change a whole bunch of items. because a lot of that is already there. I can fail fast because I can change it exactly where I need to change it, and I can change it quickly. And ultimately, right, once you're doing that, you have the opportunity to revolutionize the customer experience. So if I want to move more into financial well-being, I want to have prevention strategies, I want to marry that with customer service, it becomes so much easier to do because I have all of the tools, right, to be able to direct that to the strategy that I want to follow at that point in time for the type of customer I want to do it. So that particular segment. So as I get more granular about it, right, I want to leave certain things easy to manage as well. So if I have visibility and transparency through all of this, it's just going to make the end outcome so much more valuable. And what you get is a great customer experience.
Okay, excellent. Let's just probe into this a bit more detail, if you don't mind. So, you mentioned in that discussion fit logic. Our audience may not know fully what fit logic is. Just give us a quick 30-second intro to what fit logic is.
Yeah, it basically operationalizes intelligence. So it manages the decision management lifecycle. So from creating rules and decision through low code, no code, to be able to then test it, use machine learning capabilities if you actually want, but very easy and a transparent way to co-create rules, test them, right, and then implement them, whether it's champion challenger or whether it's shadow rules. You want to be able to implement them and manage them. So it just doesn't look at how do you create fancy models. It really looks at how do you operationalize it and how is it easy to operationalize.
So,
right.
So the model that we're seeing, thank you for that. It's very helpful. So the model that we're seeing, the pyramid in front of us, is this fundamentally a technology solution, or is it more of a cultural solution? What's the difference between the two, I guess, or what's the mix between the two?
I think one enables the other. I think the culture enables the technology and the way you look at it, right? Our culture, like I said, is about that fundamental question: is it done right? Right. Yeah. So when we are building tools, how do we focus on AI accelerated delivery when we are building our agentic framework, right? So when we have our agent assist tool there on Debt Manager, right, how is it actually working and making sense? So I would say it's both, but I think culture definitely feeds the technology pyramid.
Okay, cool. And what are sort of some of the downsides that we need to be careful of? So obviously, AI has lots of potential, but there's also some negatives. What are some of those that we need to keep an eye out for?
Yeah. I think the obvious one, especially in the risk industry, is having the right guardrails, right? So you don't want to hallucinate. You want to ensure you stay ethical. There's no bias in your processes. So I think that's the first thing, to ensure you have the right guardrails, right? And once you build up your technology stack in the correct way, those guardrails can actually start working together through the different technologies, right? So in an agentic framework, you can have an agent, that creates, okay, this is what I need to say to the customer. It can be handed over to another agent that validates that message. Now that agent could be calling out to a decision engine and saying, give me the right parameters so I can validate that. So I'm building the guardrails and we're like, well, you can't actually say that, and you can't actually offer that. Go back and do it again. So it's really around using the different technologies for what they're best suited at, as opposed to trying to create everything into one solution, right? So not everything can be built into one agent. How do I get multiple agents? How do I use different features and functions to be able to create the correct solution?
It's great. So tell me how I can start to reimagine this journey then. Where do I start?
And I think in terms of reimagining your customer journey is, what your objectives are, what you want from your customer, the experience that you want to give to, and usually it comes down to, how do I satisfy the customer need? How do I ensure through all points of the customer journey, I'm aware of what is actually going on? And then you've got to really think about reimagining it. And I think I alluded to it earlier, is you can have a process and you can replace a block with AI, but fundamentally, it's not going to give you that full value. What you've got to do is step back and understand, how do I reimagine this process? Because that's going to be so much more valuable. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go into a huge amount of analysis and try and figure this out, but really around understanding that I need to reimagine this. So a simple question, I mean, many banks do QA reactively, right? AI gives you the ability to do QA as it happens, right? So
Yeah.
you are checking and you are able to do that QA, you are be able to determine that call quality and change it there and then, right? And not try and do it reactively. So if you only considered the portion of, well, I'm just going to do a portion around the call center agent experience, right, without thinking about the QA portion, you're going to do a very, older process, right, to match a need where you can actually have it all together in one. So when you reimagine that process, it just becomes so much more easier and so much more valuable through that. And I don't think I have to convince anyone about the customer journey, but really understanding, okay, but what do we do different around the awareness and the interest part? How can we do the purchasing part differently? What do we do on retain? And it doesn't have to be only one portion, like the purchase portion that has to be very slick, but the other portions are still a bit archaic.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
And well, thank you for that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think the last point is just bringing that all together. So I wouldn't say there is, one theme out of this actually outweighs the other. It's really about understanding where you are, what you need to achieve, and then ensuring that you do things correctly. And it is that simple and it is that complicated. But I would on trying to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, okay. And I agree with you entirely. I mean, it's one of those areas where there's so much interest from everybody that actually trying to pick the right area or to focus on is actually the biggest challenge, because there's just so much to consider. Okay.
Yep.
Naeem, it's been really great talking to you. I'm sure the audience will have questions. Unfortunately, because we're not live, it means that we can't respond directly. Do you have any contact details that you can share with where people can get hold of you, who can ask questions?
Yeah, it's my name, Naeem Abraham at crsoftware.com. I can talk about this for weeks. So I welcome just the conversation on this, because this is something that I'm really passionate about. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me or contact CR Software. They will find me because they'll know what it's related to. So yeah, happy to continue the conversation.
Excellent. Great. Thank you much. Well, thank you much for your time. And I'd like to also thank our audience for listening to us and staying with us this far into the video. We look forward to seeing you again soon sometime. Thank you very much and take care. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.